This week you'll see a mini collection of a few garments that go with each other. I've got the first one to share. It's an amazing red jacket in linen. Initially this had binding, but I transformed it into facings. Lots of practical bits that you can apply to your own sewing projects. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing, and this is a special week. I have already shared with you my plans about making a mini collection during this week in the context of the Love Notion sale that's happening right now through Friday the 6th. Remember, site-wide, all the patterns are 40% off, the courses as well. The only pattern that is not on sale is the recently released Lago Cargos. All the rest you can grab for a lot less. Remember to use my code when you check out, LPN10, for an extra 10% off. So that's even on top of the sale price, so it's a pretty good deal. Please use my affiliate link if you like to support my work. I do receive a small commission back if you purchase through there, but you don't pay anything extra. If you do use it, I'm very grateful. If you have not watched my previous plans video, go ahead and watch it. And I am sharing all the garments I'm planning to sew this week. It's all going to come together in a mini collection featuring red as the base color and then blue as a secondary color. I'm using prints, I'm using solids, and I'm very excited to share the first garment here. I decided to tackle the first garment that I knew was going to take a little longer than the others. Just because of the way I like to sew and hand-based and whatnot, you know, these things can take a little while longer for me. So what I've got here is the Coda jacket. This pattern has only been released for a few months. I think it was released in February, and this is already the third time I'm making it in the same year. That goes to show how much I love it. And there's so many options that you can choose here. You can choose to have just a really clean neckline or a collar or a hood. This is rounded over here, and I've done that rounded feature on both my other versions. All the discussion about the pattern review, the fitting adjustments, and fabric discussion can be found in the first video I made about the Coda. I also have a separate video showing you how to bind these little corners really neatly. Really unique technique, so go ahead and watch that previous content. I'm working on the same base pattern I've used twice before, so the same fitting adjustments, the same everything. So I'm not worried about fit here. In essence, the pattern is the same one. And that first Coda that I made in a cotton waffle material is just so beautiful, and I've worn it in casual settings, and I've also worn it semi-dressed up to go to church. So you're seeing some images here of me wearing it to church one day with wide leg pants. I have very simple cami underneath and a scarf. Very nice, comfortable outfit. I felt amazing on the day because I felt like I was wearing pajamas. I felt like I was wearing something that was made out of knit fabrics, but actually both garments are not knit fabrics. So that goes to show that you can be comfortable in woven designs as long as there's nice amounts of ease and shaping. You're going to look put together while also comfortable, and I really enjoyed that look. I've also worn it out on holiday with sneakers and linen pants, and it's just such a lovely design. And after making that first one, I made a second one back in May when the other site-wide sale was going on. That was just a vision come true. A type of designer Chanel-esque inspired one that was fully lined, made out of wool suiting, where I kept all the original features of the pattern, including the roundness here, put trim all around the edges by hand. Very nice trim with beige and gold threads, very gorgeous. I did it with the pockets, I added patch pockets, and I made a glissando skirt to match. So it's a really cool set that I can wear on its own as separate pieces or bring them together. And I have actually worn this together to church. All I did there was wear a simple black cami and a pink scarf with a pink bag. Very simple outfit, my black boots. It's just very easy to put these pieces together. Knowing that the jacket and the skirt are so striking, that's all you need. Very simple to dress up with these garments. So enjoyable, a memorable day, let me say. And it was just so amazing to be dressed up like that, knowing I made it myself. All the effort that I put into these garments really paid off because I felt so good. And this time I've chosen red linen. I'm using the same red linen I used for my Lago Cargos. You would have seen that one a few days ago. so they could go together if I wanted. And this time I decided to add a few changes, mainly got to do with the neckline finish and just the roundness of the looks here. I wanted to eliminate those round areas, as I mentioned. I wanted to just straighten this out at the bottom everywhere, and I didn't want to bind anything or line it. I'm working with linen, and linen is great in a single layer, especially when it's hot. It's just the best fabric, and I love my jackets made out of linen in single layers. Thank you very much. So I decided to finish everything with facings instead. In the sewing segment, you're gonna see all the steps I went through to get this finalized piece, including how to create the facings, the block fusing, general construction, the patch pockets. I even ended up adding an overlap vent in the center back seam at a late addition to the project. So yeah, it came out exactly like I wanted, so let's see how it came together. You can see the original curve of the Coda, so this is how the center front is right there. And I've done my previous versions with that curve, but for this one I just wanted it straight. I wanted a 90-degree angle. So all I did was put paper behind there and sort of around there. And just to make the curve smooth, I just continued with that curve until it started going down. I just went straight across like this and then down. This will affect where the collar is going to lie when I sandwich it between the facing, but I don't really mind if it lands here, if it lands there, if it lands there, or right on the edge. I don't really mind. Here is the front of the Coda jacket. This is the back of the Coda jacket. I have kept the original pieces to create the facings. If you wanted to sew your facings in with 3/8 of an inch, then I think you should add 3/8 of an inch here on the neckline and at the center front. The original design is supposed to go up to here and then be bound, so you don't have excess seam allowance in these areas because of the binding. I've decided to just keep it like it is, and I'm only going to use 1/4 of an inch to sew the facings on over here and down the center. So in my view, that is negligible. It's not going to affect the fit. There is plenty of ease in the jacket anyway, so I'm not going to be adding on 3/8 of an inch over here, 3/8 of an inch down there, and the same on the back. I'm going to leave it like it is, but it's your decision. At the shoulders, I have about 3¼ inches for the facing. That's the width right there, and it's got to be the same amount for the back. I measure the same amount like this, and I cut my back facing. And I always extend my facing so that I can cut it out in a single layer afterwards. So I have that width right there at the shoulders. And then once we get into the straight area right here, the width is 2¼ It could be more. It could have been 3. It's just that I cut this facing to match the amount of fabric I had to be able to cut the facing. So it's just drawing a slight curve. It's just keeping it nice and curved over here. Don't do a facing that's got an angle, a sharp angle like that. That does not make sense. And I've drawn it all the way down to the bottom. Because the original jacket is bound at the bottom, there's no hem allowance as such. So to keep the original length the way I want it, where there is going to be a hem allowance, I added 1 inch down here. And over here, instead of having the original curve that went like this, I just straightened it out like that. Nothing really fancy about the adjustment over here. Basically, this is the original shape there, and it's 1 inch shorter. Now it's 1 inch longer and just straight. And then to match the new length, I matched the length of the facing over here. The original pocket of the Coda is curved because the side of the jacket is curved. In this case, I want mine to be a rectangle. So this is just going to match the size that I'm sewing, the proportions of my jacket. This is just reference. If you want to add patch pockets, I suggest you just cut out rectangles and just pin them on the jacket and see what looks best for you. And then for the flap, it's the same width, but it's just 3½ inches long that way. Then I'm going to add some patch pockets on the chest. This is almost a square. Across here it's 5¾ and here we have 6 inches. And the flap is the same width and it's also 3½ inches. So these are just the measurements for mine, just as references. You can make yours smaller or larger. The original Coda does not have chest pockets, but I'm adding them onto mine. This is the front facing, and I'm going to block fuse like always. Fabric has already been fused. If it shrunk a little, that's already been done. It's already happened. And now I'm going to cut out my facing pieces and I'll get a really accurate fit along the neckline like that. Here are the pattern pieces for my modified Coda. Remember, I had lengthened my pattern 1 inch here so that I can have hem allowance because the original jacket doesn't. I did the same for the sleeves because these are supposed to just be bound right there. So I also needed to add an inch there so I can fold that up and have a hem. Here are my facings. I'm gonna have a little seam there. I had to join up the fabric so that I could get facings from my fabric. That's the back facing over here, and here is the back. The original Coda jacket is cut on the fold at the back, but I'm gonna have a center back seam because, again, the only way I could place this on my fabric. Over there is my collar, and here is the chest pocket and flap and the hip pocket and flap that I've already shown you. Before doing any of the sewing construction, of course, I'm gonna stay stitch the rounded necklines. I would never skip this step, and I always do it in the same direction from the shoulders into the center. The other layer, you just flip the fabric and do it in the same direction, and these are the fronts. I'll just repeat the same things for the backs. The facing is going to be sewn on at 1/4 of an inch later on, so I'm sewing pretty much on the edge right here with a regular stitch length. On the table, you can see my back is completed. Initially, I was just going to do a center back seam, but then I added an overlap vent, a different technique than what I've shown you before. But I'll show you that closer up at the sewing table. At this point, I can lay my front pieces on top. The front has a dart there. It's not part of the original pattern. It's just a result of a full bust adjustment I did. And at this point, I can sew the shoulder seams. I'm gonna leave the side seams free. I'm gonna do those afterwards at the end when the facing and the collar is already on. I'm gonna show you the back of my jacket just a little closer. And initially, my idea was just to add a center back seam. That's what I could do. I ended up pushing all the seam allowance to one side and top stitching it. Then I saw I had these little bits of fabric left over, and I decided to create an overlap vent. In this case, I cut out pieces and sewed them on to create the extension. So there's a seam right on the edge there, and then we get that first extension that's serged. Everything's the same, everything's really neat. And then on the side that's underneath, I had to sew on the extension. That's why you see that seam there. It won't matter. I think linen, you can get away with it. So that's one extension there, and then the other one's folded to the back. That section is going to have buttons, and on the layer that's on top, I'm going to have buttonholes. Now on the other side, you can see the seam allowance all going to one side, the same side as the vent. So that was good. If this was another garment, I would usually just press this open if I didn't want to do any top stitching like I do here. So that is the difference with this one. It's not the same technique. It's just something I figured out I could do later on because I had a little bit of fabric left over. Easier to do the way I showed you with the extension. So have a look at that video and do this easier. Let's just get these shoulder seams sewn and pressed towards the back. Because I'm doing a lot of top stitching on this jacket, I'm going to top stitch the shoulder seams towards the back. I have already done the first row with a 1/4 inch presser foot, and now I'm doing the row on the edge with my blind hem presser foot with a needle to the left. That always gets you a very nice clean finish. Look at these two rows, they look so neat. I'm top stitching in a red that's slightly darker than my red tone in the jacket so that you can see it. And it just looks so neat without much effort. Here we have the facing pieces. These are the ones I created. It's not part of the pattern. I've got the back at the bottom and the two fronts on the top, aligned at the shoulder seams, and I'm just going to get these sewn at 3/8 seam allowance. I was initially going to serge the edges of the facing, but I just could not get binding out of my mind. So I just took one of my husband's older shirts and just cut 3 strips of bias cut tape right there. That's all that I need to cover the facing. I'm not doing the continuous binding method. I'm just cutting 3 separate strips and then piecing them together. I'm at the ironing board and I've just sprayed it with a good amount of starch spray. I've just got 2 seams for the length that I need, and this is 35 millimeters. The bias tape maker is 18 millimeters. So if you just double what you see at the back of your bias tape maker, you'll get the correct width to make the bias tape. I'm just pushing it through and ironing it, and it's so easy, and I'm going to get just enough for my facing. Cotton is really easy to work with, so I just wrap it around the raw edge and hand baste it in place in one go, and I'm going to top stitch in one step. I'm not going to do the step where you sew on one side and flip it to the next and top stitch again. That's just too much for this project. And I'm using my blind hem presser foot with the needle to the left again to sew on the edge. I am using the red thread so that it contrasts against the binding. I think it looks really, really nice. I'm just really excited how this is going to look. Binding all of this took maybe an extra 30 minutes rather than if I'd serged it, but I think it's always worth it. This is the collar piece. It's cut on the fold. It was cut on the fold, but it's actually a pretty long piece. I've marked with chalk what's the wrong side. So now I'm just going to fold this lengthwise, right sides together. This is the original collar. The original collar is meant to be sewn over here. So nothing has changed. This collar is not bound in the original technique. So you are supposed to sew this, so I'm gonna sew it. I'm gonna trim it a little smaller over here, but not too much. Now I'm gonna head to the iron and press it, make it neat. And then I am gonna go ahead and top stitch around all that and down this slanted edge so that it's ready to be sandwiched between the neckline and the facing. Okay, here is the jacket all extended. This is why I don't want side seams sewn at the moment. And this is right sides up. I've got the collar that I've just sewn. What needs to happen to the collar is you need to figure out which is your pretty side of the collar, the right side of your collar. I've decided this is going to be the side that's going to face up. This is going to be the wrong side. It's just the way I top stitched. So basically I want the main jacket and the collar to both be right sides up when I place it together like this. So basically wrong side of collar to right side of jacket. And now I'm just going to baste this around, get it fixed in place there so it doesn't move. Once I've got that layer basted on, then I'm going to bring my facing, and basically the collar is going to be sandwiched between the main neckline and the facing right here. So that is the process. Baste the collar on first, get that nice and neat, then get my facing, place it on top. If we move the collar out of the way, the facing and the jacket are right sides together. So I'm just going to take my time to hand baste to have it all neat. Okay, here I have the first layer hand basted on. This is the collar. And when I straightened out this neckline, the original neckline was like this, it was curved, it just had a whole different shape. So because I just sort of raised it and made it go down, I knew the collar wasn't going to end up in the same original place as the jacket, but that's fine. The collar reaches exactly where it should to be continuous with the center front, so it's going to be a little different. So it basically finishes 1/4 of an inch before the edge. And that's where I'm going to sew the facing. So basically once we flip this, it'll be the collar and the center front all seamless or continuous. I knew this was going to be something that wasn't going to be exactly the same. I'm still using the same collar. It's just that when you modify a neckline, it's obviously going to be different. If it had ended up a little shorter than this, that's fine. Then you would have had a little piece like that. So I've made sure everything is symmetrical on both sides right there. And now I'm going to take my facing and place it right on top. Remember, right side of facing to right side of jacket with the collar in the middle. This point is going to reach that point right there. And I'm going to have to push this collar out of the way in order to sew that when I do this section. Here I have a pin and a little bolt because I've got the collar folded out of the way. Otherwise the collar would be clashing into the seam. So it's all tucked in out of the way to make sure I only sew through the 2 layers here. You know, I don't like to pivot my needle. I like to finish and then start again on intersections. Finish the center fronts. I've removed my 1/4 inch presser foot because across the bottom I want to sew at the hem allowance I'm going to use, and I've decided I'm going to use just 3/4 of an inch. So that is how I'm going to sew this. What I do here to get rid of bulk is just start cutting right here on the facing edge about 3/8, just a little bit up to there, and then from behind where the hem is going to be, I want to go in a little further from this edge, at least 3/8, and then start trimming away there. To flip this, I am gonna remove all that basting stitch, but to flip this, you want to fold the seam allowances towards the facing, so forward over here on this intersection, hold them nice and firm, and you get a really nice crisp result. And then from behind the facing, your hem will start. That's why that needed to be further in, like that. So that's how the centers are going to be finished. I'm going to make sure that this is not seen, that it's not on the edge, so it'll be a little further in like you see there. And when it's time to do the hem, I'm going to do it by hand. I flipped over the collar areas and they're both very neat. They all go right up to the edge right there. That's nice. I am going to be snipping into the curves of the seam allowance, and around the back is also very curved. I'm at the ironing board and I'm just pressing this facing flat. I do want to top stitch the back facing, and you've seen me do this multiple times on a lot of projects. So I've already done 1/2 and then moved it over, and I'm doing this half. So knowing that everything is perfect and the facing is not going to move smooth on the ironing board. I'm just going to hand baste it while it's here. The fabric that covers the ironing board is pretty tough, so there's no way I could sew it to the ironing board. My needle's just not going to go through it. I am going to be top stitching above the binding area so that the binding area is free. Okay, the facing is sewn. I have top stitched the back of the facing. It's still looking quite messy, but I can see the end quite close now. And I'm just going to run through the next steps. I'm not going to film those. They are quite basic. I'm just going to hand baste the side seams so I can try the jacket on and just figure out exactly where I want my patch pockets to be. I'm going to have hip pockets here. I've also got the flaps right here that are going to go on top. I've got a chest pocket that I need to figure out where I want to place. Here is the flap. Then I'm going to sew the side seams properly because I want to be able to have good access to the front being flat without being attached at the side seams. So after all the pockets are in, side seams, I have already got my sleeves prepared. I've got the seam pressed open, the hem up like this, and then I'll set the sleeves in and then do the final touches of maybe top stitching the center and doing my hand hem. I want to do that first with the jacket on my body so that I know exactly where these pockets are going to look good. Then I'm going to hand baste the pockets on and sew them on. I'm quickly doing some guide stitches all around the edges of the pockets. I have already serged them all and I'm doing this at 3/8 of an inch because that's the amount that we're going to fold it in towards the wrong side. I'd rather not eyeball that and burn my fingers at the iron. I find it easier to just do a long stitch length with a contrasting thread and guide the sewing on the metal plate underneath. It always gives you a really neat result and very, very nice rectangle pockets without any wonky folds. So there's a lot of this to do, but because I'm batch doing them all, it'll happen quickly. On the top edge, I prefer to just fold it in once by 1 inch. That's why I serge the edge. And I like to finish the top of pockets by folding that top end onto itself right sides together and then sewing these little seams. Once those little seams are sewn, we flip it and then we get such a clean little finish on the top of the pockets. It's very neat and easy to top stitch down later. After getting them all pressed and neat, I'm quickly top stitching these at about 3/4 of an inch. I still have a bit of fabric underneath. Turns out very neat flap. It's just a little rectangle as well that you fold right sides together and then sew the short ends together by 3/8. Once we do that, we flip it right sides out and we get our flap. The 2 row edges, we need to make sure they're together and we can serge that closed. And then I'm going to go ahead and top stitch this with 2 rows like I'm going to top stitch everything else. I had already determined the positioning of my patch pockets, so I knew exactly where they had to go. And the same as with everywhere else, I'm doing the top stitching all the same. I'm doing 1/4 of an inch first, going all around these shapes. There's a lot of little places to pivot there. I just slow down. And then I do the second row with my blind hem presser foot. Okay, here you can see the pocket has already been sewn on. It's all very neat. That is going to be the right side of my flap, and that serged edge is going to touch the top of the pocket here. And I'm going to pin it in place, and then we're going to sew that with 3/8 seam allowance. Now that we've sewn it there, we can bring the flap over. Now, as optional, you should have done a buttonhole if you want one before sewing on the flap. I decided I'm not doing that, so you don't see any buttonhole there. And now we can top stitch this down with 1/4 of an inch. This shouldn't catch the top of the pocket that you have underneath. And we just top stitch that down. That will hold the flap in place. This is my finalized Coda jacket. Had a vision for it and it's exactly what I wanted. So the first thing you'll notice here, and I showed you in the sewing segment, is that the collar reaches this. Previously, this was a little lower and it was a little rounded, so the collar would reach around there and then it would turn rounded. The positioning here I knew was not going to be as per the original because I had changed the neckline, but having it reach right here is really good. I don't mind. Next time, if I want the collar to be shorter and reach maybe an inch and 1/4 from the edge, I'll just shorten the collar piece at the center back. That's all you would need to do if you would prefer the collar to be a little further in. I'm just experimenting, I'm having fun, and I'm really open to results like this. I was not gonna go in and cut the collar shorter and all of that. No, just left it like that, and I think that's absolutely fine. What you see when you wear this is the facing inside right there. and you saw that I ended up binding the edges, but I couldn't get the binding out of my mind. I think it's just pretty. Add your personal touch to the garment. It's not going to be seen, but it just looks so precious inside, and I love doing that. I love top stitching the back facing as well. I think that's fine. On linen you can do a lot of top stitching and it looks good. If this had been a suiting material, something I wanted to look more high-end, I would not have top stitched that, but that's what I did with the linen and I think that's good. The shoulders are top stitched there as you see in a double row, so is the collar. Everywhere I did a lot of top stitching and I love that. Sleeves are super easy to set in. Hand hem right here. Remember, I added hem allowance to the sleeves because the original didn't have hem allowance. It's because it was bound on the edge, you didn't need extra length. But when you want a hem, you do need to add that. I have a full video showing you what my preferred method is to set in sleeves, so have a look at that. There's always a lot of helpful content here. And I always knew I was going to have a center back seam. So my initial plan was just to have a center back seam and press it open, maybe top stitch on both sides on each edge. That was my initial process. But after I finished cutting, I had these little pieces left over around the selvage, and I thought, why don't I add an overlap vent? Now recently I showed you a video on how to do this to your pattern piece where you add an extension. When you don't have an extension, you can add that on, like sew it on. Here on this edge we have a seam. That's the first extension, just a simple extension. The layer on the bottom has a double extension because you have it folded back like that. You can see that seam there. I decided to top stitch it to highlight it so it would look intentional. And then this covers it, and I added on 2 buttons. And then on the front we just have the regular facing go down. You saw how I finished that. This is hand hemmed. My patch pockets are in. I didn't want to go overboard with buttonholes and buttons, so I just left my flaps like this. I think when you add less details, it can make a garment look not so casual. In this case, I do want to wear it and dress it up and wear it with dresses and things, so I wanted to keep it less casual as it could be. That meant just adding less details on it. So I do have 4 big buttons in the front right there. That's how it looks inside. I have matching serger thread, and it's just very neat. It's just exactly like I wanted it to be, and I'm so happy with it. So I'm going to style it here 2 ways with my red Lago cargo so you can see the look. So here is my Coda jacket in linen. It's got all the original fit of the original jacket. It's just that I've made it in a slightly different way. I've added extra patch pockets and a vent on the back that you'll see up closer. I know the Lago cargos are not on sale this week. I did want these to go together eventually. Up closer you can see the length of the jacket is just hitting the mid hip. I achieved this by adding 2 extra inches to the original pattern just because my height needs this, and I do have enough ease to be able to close this up and wear this nicely and comfortably without it being tight or boxy. I did my hem by hand right there. I added my facing and I bound the edges of the facing. I think that looks really neat, and I love that pop of blue in there that you can't really see. At the back you can see my overlap vent that I ended up adding at the last minute. It's super cool. It's got 2 buttons that are functional, buttonholes, and I think that's a really nice detail to have on a linen jacket. Here is the top of my jacket. I do have a little scarf underneath, but I think the collar is very neat. I am open to modifying it for a next version I make to make it a little shorter so it finishes above this area right there, but for this time I'm very happy with this. Remember, I changed the neckline here. It was rounded, now it's not. It goes this way and then straight down 90 degrees, so I was expecting this. This is how it looks like on the back. The original pattern doesn't have a center back seam. Over here you can see my collar reaches all the way to the edge of the center front here, and it's all enclosed inside the facing. It's a really neat finish there with the binding. I really enjoyed doing that. Here you can see my chest patch pocket. I think is really cool. I would have been really sad if I hadn't had enough fabric to do this detail. I do recognize this is a lot of red going on here, and I know a lot of people would not want to be dressed from head to toe in red, but I'm one of the exceptions that actually will wear this outfit exactly like it is here at some point when I'm feeling in a sort of mood. I am so satisfied with the results here. It's just exactly like I imagined it to be, and it was a very enjoyable process. I love my red jacket in linen, modified Coda. It's still the same pattern, just sewn a little differently and with a few extra details. I really enjoyed sewing the details, especially that overlap vent there that came at a later stage. And I'm also going to combine it with one of the garments in this mini capsule, which is my long maxi Cebu collection skirt that I made last Friday. It was always going to be part of this collection. It has red, it has blue, it's a beautiful print. So I'm gonna just pair these together, and that's one way that I can just join these two garments together, and I feel really good about the pairing. It's another look with my red linen Coda jacket. I love this. I've got it paired with my pencil skirt made from the Cebu collection patterns. 7 skirts in that one pattern, and this is just the most basic one. I added my own extra flair by making it a lot longer down to my ankles and adding an overlap vent on the front to allow me to walk. It's a functional detail but also pretty, and I love it. I love the print here. That is why I incorporated this print into this collection to match with the red. This color combination here with the print and the red jacket makes me really happy. I feel myself 100% in a look like this. Vents on the front. I also have an overlap vent on my jacket. As I show you the next garments in this collection, you'll be seeing more of this jacket because I'll be mixing and matching the jacket with other garments as I add on to this mini collection this week. This is not the last time you're going to see it. I hope this was fun for you. I hope you have a go at creating a coda with a facing or anything else really. It's very easy to do, just creating it from your actual pattern pieces that you have there. I didn't add the 3/8 seam allowance to do this because I felt that sewing the facing on with a 1/4 inch instead was just going to be the same result anyway. It's negligible, especially when you have a garment with ease like this. If I'd been working with something really fitted and really exact in the fit, I would not have done that. I would have added the seam allowance to the original piece and then created the facing, but that is not the case for this one. So I do explain the reasons why I do what I do. I just have a think about it first without just doing the same thing all the time. It's a case-by-case basis in the way that I make my decisions, and I just pass that on to you. So maybe you can give that some thought as well. And I'm very happy. Don't forget to check out the Love Notion sale this week. It goes through Friday, 40% off site-wide. Please use my affiliate link if you'd like to support my work. I do receive a small commission back if you purchase through there, but you don't pay anything extra. If you do use it, I'm very grateful. Don't forget to use my code LPN10 at checkout for an extra 10% off on top of the sale price. That's all from me, and I'll see you again very soon with more garments in this mini collection. As I'm talking, I have some of these partially sewn, so I'm just really happy this week. I'm getting to make things that I really wanted to have, and I'm just so excited to share. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the fun content, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye.